wide-ranging discussion already this morning, and I'm just kind of conscious of time. So if perhaps we could take a couple of questions here. So what I'd like perhaps is to ask people to identify themselves, their name, and where they're working, where they're coming from, and who they'd like to direct the first question at. So and we have a roving mic, so can I have a call out for any questions that anybody wants to ask? Yes.
Good morning. My name is Peter Brown from the McAvoy Group. We're a contractor. Question for Stephen. You mentioned in your presentation the identification of the inappropriate allocation of risk in the current public works contracts, and the fact that BIM would be a great tool to mitigate that risk. Is there any work going on simultaneously in terms of the writing of those contracts and readiness for quarter 2, level 5 type stuff in terms of maybe more appropriate and fairer allocation of risk within the contract?
Well, I think when you look at the allocation of risk in a contract, it's not the contract that's the problem. It's the contracting authority's inability to deal with the risk in the first instance. So what needs to happen there is you need to have a proper procurement strategy to start with. The risk needs to be identified as to whether it's going to be retained by the contracting authority or whether it's going to be suitably passed to the contractor. And if it is going to be passed to the contractor, the risk has to be very defined. Because our experience is if it's not defined, you will end up in litigation. And that's of no use to anybody. The BIM process that we're looking at doing will have a risk management strategy attached, which will be a collaborative effort between the design team and the administrative team to actually make the decision as to whether the risk has been appropriately identified. And that's how we see the mitigation of risk. The contract is not the problem, it's how the contract is ran currently is the problem. And I think through using the BIM process, people are going to be able to far easier see the risk that's involved. And once the risk is identifiable, then the advice from the construction professionals to their clients will be, you need to manage this risk. You know, and that will become a policy part of the BIM implementation, as opposed to something that's a tick box exercise at the moment, and we'll assign all the risk to the contractor and let him worry about it. That approach is no longer, you know, I mean, we recognise that in the OGP, it's not acceptable. It's common practice at the minute, so we have to develop a system that's going to help eliminate that common practice. And the only way we can do that is to educate people about how to do it properly. And that's the approach that the OGP will be taking through the construction contracts at the moment.
That's one word.
Yeah.
Thanks. Great to see the progress that OGP are making. I know you've done a considerable amount of work in that respect. How confident are you in terms of progress of all the contracting authorities to be ready? Our frustration, we're a Northern Irish based contractor, level 2 since May 2016, March 2016, that was mandated by the UK government then. And that mandate, despite it being a mandate, we've been asked to do very few BIM level contracts. We do it as a matter of good practice internally. It's a good delivery tool, and our procurement is aligned to that end. But we've very few public sector contracts clients in the UK ready to do it. Some very large ones, but the majority nowhere near it. So given that they've been on the journey maybe a little bit longer and have refined a little bit, how comfortable are you that the contracting authorities or the employers are ready?
Yeah, well, ultimately it's going to come down to people wanting to engage in the process in the first instance. We've looked at how the UK have delivered their BIM implementation strategy, and we've obviously everybody left everything to the last minute and people just weren't ready for it when the curtain came down and decided from now on. That's why we're adopting a phased implementation process, and part of that phased implementation process is to afford the opportunity to all the people engaged in the BIM process to actually do on-the-job training, as opposed to looking for people that are fully qualified in everything. I mean, we'd end up with very few contractors in the Irish market anyway that would be actually eligible or be shortlisted for a job if that was the case. So we have to have an approach where when we mandate, we're going to allow a grace period for learning how the BIM process works. And they will be defined within a period of time, some 12 months, some be 16 months for some different types of projects. But at the end of those 16 months, then you will be engaged in full BIM right the way through to asset delivery. I think it's a learning curve that has to be developed in order for people to train, because I don't think it's going to be possible for everyone in this room to be fully trained in BIM by Q2 this year. It's just not going to happen. You know, there's a reality there that you have to accept, that there is a deficiency. But take, for example, there the likes of what TII are doing, what Dublin City Council are doing. They have actually engaged on BIM projects at the moment, and they're using those BIM projects as a learning tool to develop the skills that they need to deliver those assets. And in 2-3 years' time, these projects that they're involved in now will have taught them very valuable lessons in how to do things, but also have taught them in how not to do things. You know, I mean, and that's going to be valuable. So that's why we're adopting the approach of a phased implementation of BIM across projects at different band levels. And ultimately, the goal will be in 5-6 years' time, we'll have a BIM-ready community.
Paolo and John, do you want to make any remarks about what you said there around readiness?
Obviously, we have started on the journey on two major programs, and we have concerns in general about the level of readiness of the industry if we look at our entire portfolio of projects. We are looking now at introducing BIM on smaller initiatives exactly for that purpose. So, for instance, and I don't quote any project in particular, but we have a program of resilience projects to enhance the resilience of our infrastructure. Climate change brought a number of threats. So there are small jobs that are complex in nature because, for instance, involve replacing the roof of a control room while underneath the control room is operational, to name one that has been recently completed. My intention is to start rolling out initiatives like this through a usage of BIM. For instance, on Lewis Cross City, BIM was used at level 2 to deliver successfully the tie-in of the red and the green line, and it avoided a lot of clashes between utilities and our infrastructure. If you recall, there was a blockade of a number of weeks, and it was achieved in around about 2/3 of the time that was allocated. So large contractors tend to be more ready, but I think we'll have to allow, as Stephen mentioned, a possibility of learning on the job. That's the best way of doing it.
Alan?
Just a general comment really, or a general question really. The work that I was involved with over the last few years, I've looked at other international programs and seen where the capability was most successful. There's obviously a lot of proactivity going on within the public sector. A lot of agencies are taking the lead themselves. But do you see, or for example, the roadmap being the support framework for successful adoption of BIM in the public sector? And if so, would you have a view on when that should be implemented going forward?
I think the roadmap has been a milestone for BIM in this country. I mean, it has set out a plan for everybody to look at. We have responsibilities as the Office of Government Procurement to deliver on the roadmap, but everyone else has responsibilities also. I do believe that the government do need to set up a specific department or authorise a specific department to deal with BIM for public sector procurement in relation to support services, documentation, collaboration of all the relevant stakeholders, and actually somebody that's going to be funded and appropriately funded to be able to bring all that information together and actually get it out there. I think it's a big ask for any one small organisation to do it. It has to be somebody placed that has experience and skill. I do know there are ongoing negotiations with several departments at the moment in relation to who's going to be given that, but I don't know who it is yet. But I do agree with you. I think it does need a resource behind it to give it the clout that it needs to engage everybody. Absolutely.
Okay. Just conscious of time, are there, sorry, you wanted to make a...
question, but yeah.
Oh yeah, I was going to call for another question. That's probably going to be the last question though, just to keep it in time. Geraldine?
Thank you very much. Geraldine Arkin from the NSAI. I suppose firstly, I have a number of comments, and firstly just to congratulate CITA on the progress that they've made over the past number of months. It's terrific to see all the activity that's ongoing, and look forward to further developments. I suppose from my perspective, it's great to be at a meeting where the central topic is a standard, and that I'm not pushing the agenda. So well done to everybody in this room. Those of you who are attending our various consultative committees, our mirror committee, and to acknowledge the work that you've done. I suppose particularly to acknowledge, Paul, the work that you led and championed at ISO. And I know full well what was involved in that. And you raised the question in terms of the national annex and how Ireland's going to react to that. And obviously that's something that's very much on our agenda. It will be largely and mainly informed by stakeholders in this room, both public and private, in terms of what's best for Ireland. And I can see that engagement happening over the next period in parallel with all the other activity. Confirm that yes, we have completed our training and our setup to offer BIM certification to companies here in Ireland. And finally, of course, to say that for anyone who wants a copy of the standard, you can of course get the IS standard from ourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Paul, did you want to?
It was just a quick comment really on the initial question. I think, I would agree. The number of contracts coming out from the UK public sector with as delivered with BIM level 2 might not be what was anticipated. But I think just to point out that the construction strategy in 2010, whether you call that a mandate or not, the strategic objectives within it were for the public sector clients. It wasn't for the supply chain. It was to get the public sector clients to improve the way in which they procured and used data about the assets. And having worked for public sector clients, both directly and indirectly, I'm not aware of any of those clients asking for the delivery teams to work inefficiently or to deliver poor quality information. I think, whether or not they put BIM level 2 in a contract, I think every public sector body has got a duty to spend taxpayers' money and ask as a minimum from the delivery teams that they manage their information effectively and that they provide quality and trustworthy information that can add value to the public sector. So whether you see BIM level 2 or BIM or ISO in your contracts, I think there's a minimum expectation. And as I think it was Peter or the gentleman said, they're seeing value just by improving the way in which they work internally, regardless of whether they're getting asked to do this thing called BIM level 2. Okay, because it provides efficiencies and increases productivity within your own organisation. So I think where there's a fixation about this thing as mandate or roadmap or dates, really as organisations you should really start to look about the way in which you're managing information effectively within your own organisation.
Thank you. So I think we'll conclude the Q&A session here.